In the heart of Mexico, four sisters ran what looked like an ordinary business. But behind closed doors, Delfina, Maria de Jesus, Carmen, and Maria Luisa Gonzalez were hiding something much darker. Locals knew them as respectable women who managed a roadside bar, but travelers who stepped inside often never came back out. The Gonzalez sisters, later called Las Poquiancas, weren't just dangerous, they were feared by even hardened criminals. Their operation, disguised as a boarding house and tavern, was actually a front for something far worse. These women used charm, fake promises, and brutal control to manipulate everyone around them. Workers they hired were rarely seen again. Authorities didn't question them for years because they kept everything clean on the outside. Well-dressed, polite, and smiling, they were wolves in silk skirts. It was only when a young woman escaped and exposed what she'd seen inside that the truth came out. The sisters ran their secret operation with terrifying efficiency. Every move was calculated. They didn't just sit back, they orchestrated, managed, and controlled. They were the kind of villains that make even the most twisted characters from shows like Breaking Bad seem small time. What made them so chilling was their cold logic. They weren't chaotic or loud, they didn't act in rage, they planned everything with a calm that made people around them freeze. It wasn't just what they did, it was how little they seemed to care. When the police finally raided their property, what they found shook the region to its core. The sisters didn't fight back. They simply watched, like they had seen it all coming. One officer later said he'd never felt such a heavy silence, the kind that wraps around your spine and doesn't let go. The Gonzalez sisters turned a quiet town into their personal empire. They ran it with fear and silence, proving that sometimes the most dangerous people don't yell. They whisper, and everyone listens. Long before the Gonzalez sisters ran their hidden empire, another woman built one that ruled the seas. Ching Shi didn't just break the rules, she rewrote them with cannon fire. Once a worker in a floating brothel, she married a pirate captain, then took over his fleet after his death. And not just took over, she expanded it until it became the most feared pirate armada in the world. She commanded over 80,000 pirates, that's more than the entire population of some American towns. Her code was strict. Any pirate who disobeyed her rules faced instant punishment. She ran her fleet like a military state, organized, brutal, and smart. Government ships tried to stop her. They failed. European forces came after her. They were humiliated. Her tactics weren't loud or reckless. They were quiet, sharp, and fast, like a knife slipping between armor plates. Ching Shi didn't just raid ships. She controlled trade routes, collected taxes, and even negotiated with governments on her own terms. When the Chinese Navy finally surrounded her with hundreds of warships, she didn't run. She walked into a government office and cut a deal that let her retire peacefully, with wealth, safety, and no punishment. She made kings and generals look foolish, all while wearing silks and keeping a calm expression. Her legend didn't grow from myths, it came from what she actually did. She turned piracy into a business, a government, and a kingdom on water. But not all dangerous women wore jewelry and smiled from a ship's deck. Some hid behind cold walls and sharper uniforms. At just 22 years old, Irma Gris had risen through the ranks of one of history's darkest systems. She wasn't a general or a mastermind. She was something worse, someone who volunteered for cruelty, who made her own rules in a place where humanity was already lost. Irma worked as a camp guard during World War II, most notoriously at Auschwitz and later Bergen-Belsen. She didn't just follow orders, she created her own brand of terror. Other guards were afraid of her. She carried a whip, wore heavy boots, and smiled at the chaos she caused. Her cruelty became so well known that even in a world filled with horror, she stood out. She controlled prisoners with fear, showing no hesitation, no doubt. She didn't shout, her silence was louder than screams. Victims said she would walk the grounds like a queen surveying her kingdom. In her mind, she ruled it, and she made sure everyone knew it. After the war, she was captured and put on trial. She showed no regret. She dressed neatly, stood straight, and barely blinked when the charges were read. Some said she looked like she was still in control. That's what made her so terrifying, not just what she did, but how calm she was about it. It started like a love story. Jodi Arias met Travis Alexander at a work event. He was charming, successful, and didn't see the warning signs soon enough. They dated, broke up, got back together, and eventually, it all went too far. What followed wasn't a crime of impulse, it was something calculated, something cold. Jodi moved closer to him after they split. She kept showing up at his house uninvited, checking his phone, watching from the shadows. Friends noticed. He noticed. But he didn't realize how far it would go. One day, Travis didn't show up to a meeting. Days later, he was found in his home. The scene was something police wouldn't forget. What shocked people wasn't just the act, it was how Jody behaved afterward. She lied to the police, changed her story multiple times and gave interviews as if she were auditioning for a reality show. She smiled, flirted, posed. In court, she acted like the victim. But the evidence told a different story. Photos, timestamps, and her own words built the case. What makes Jodi Arias dangerous isn't only what she did, it's how calmly she tried to erase it. Her obsession didn't look wild, it looked quiet, neat, and practiced. And that's what chills people the most. Not the shouting or rage, but the silence of someone who plans and smiles through it all. Now, obsession can look a lot of ways, and sometimes it wears designer clothes and posts selfies from a luxury car. She looked like an influencer, long lashes, high heels, yachts, and cocktails. But behind the filters and luxury was a different story. Claudia Ochoa Felix wasn't just trending on social media. She was rumored to be connected to one of Mexico's most feared cartels. They called her the Kim Kardashian of crime. She denied everything, always insisting she was just a model, but people noticed things. The way she posed with weapons, the armored cars, the bodyguards, and the timing of certain posts. Authorities linked her to a group known for handling things most people never talk about. Whether she was truly leading a criminal arm or just close to those who did, she made one thing clear: she was untouchable, or at least, that's what she believed. People around her disappeared. She kept showing up at clubs and VIP events like nothing ever happened. That cold confidence made headlines. In the end, her story ended as suddenly as it rose. Officially it was called an accidental death, but the questions never stopped. The timing, the people involved, the silence. Claudia blurred the lines between fashion and fear, selfies and secrecy. She turned the spotlight into a weapon, and no one could tell for sure if it was all real or if that was part of the game. Melissa Ann Shepard had a kind smile, polite manners, and the look of a friendly grandmother. But those who got close to her, especially the men she met through personal ads or dating websites, rarely lived to tell the story. She didn't need force or threats. She used charm, patience, and something far more subtle. Over the years, Melissa married several elderly men. Each time the relationship moved quickly, and each time something strange happened. Her new husbands became ill, some passed away. Others ended up in hospitals with no clear explanation. By the time investigators started connecting the dots, Melissa had already been involved in multiple suspicious cases. She wasn't reckless. That's what made her so hard to catch. She played the part of the grieving widow perfectly. She moved towns, changed names, and even served time more than once, only to go back to her old ways when released. In court, she acted confused and delicate. But behind that quiet act was someone who knew exactly what she was doing. What made Melissa so dangerous wasn't rage or impulse, it was the slow, calculated approach, a pattern that repeated again and again. She didn't chase her victims. They came to her thinking they had found someone gentle to grow old with. Her nickname, the Internet Black Widow, didn't come from fantasy. It came from a trail of real people, real marriages, and real damage. When she smiled at a man and called him darling, he had no idea that those could be the last sweet words he'd ever hear. Linda Hazard wore a white coat and called herself a doctor, even though she never earned a real medical degree. That didn't stop her from opening a health clinic in the forests of Washington state, where she promised to cure all kinds of illnesses, using nothing but extreme fasting. Some people traveled thousands of miles to be treated by her. They never made the trip back. Her method was simple: deny food and cleanse the body. But it wasn't a healing process. It was a trap. Patients grew weaker and more confused by the day, and Linda kept their belongings for safekeeping. She'd gain legal control of their wills or possessions, then claimed they had passed from natural causes. It was slow, quiet, and chilling. Her clinic didn't look threatening. It resembled a retreat, a place for peace and health. But behind those wooden walls, Linda ran things her own way. When one woman barely escaped and told authorities what had happened, an investigation followed, and the truth came out. Linda had left a trail of broken people, carefully hidden behind soft words and fake science. Even when convicted, she kept defending her work, claiming she was misunderstood. Years later, she opened a new clinic and started again, until fate finally turned her own rules against her. Linda Hazard wasn't angry or loud, she just believed she knew better than everyone else. And that made her especially dangerous. But while Linda hid her actions behind fake medicine, the next woman used superstition, fear, and a kitchen pot. In a quiet Italian village during World War II, Leonarda Cianciulli ran a small shop and lived a modest life. She was known for being kind, helpful, and a little superstitious. People came to her for advice, tea, and sometimes even fortune readings. What they didn't know was that Leonarda believed she had to make unthinkable sacrifices to protect her family. She claimed a fortune teller once warned her that all her children would die unless she performed a certain ritual. When her oldest son was drafted into the army, her fear turned into something far darker. She began inviting local women into her home, offering to help them with life problems, then making sure they never left. What she did next earned her a place in criminal history. She didn't just hide the bodies, she turned them into soap and baked goods, which she gave to neighbors. Her logic was twisted, but she believed she was saving her son by doing something terrible to others. Leonarda was eventually caught after a woman's sister raised suspicion. During questioning, she confessed with pride and even offered detailed instructions of her methods, as if she were sharing a family recipe. Her calm delivery and matter-of-fact attitude horrified investigators. She wasn't frantic or afraid, she believed in what she had done, and that's what made her so dangerous. Leonarda turned fear into action and superstition into horror, all with a smile and a copper kettle. Griselda Blanco didn't just rise in a male-dominated underworld, she owned it. While others were building reputations with loud moves and bold threats, she used precision and silence. Known by many as the Black Widow, the drug lord was feared not just for what she did, but for how calmly she did it. She operated in the shadows of Miami and beyond, building an empire that stretched across borders. Her business moves were brutal, but efficient. Rivals didn't last long. Associates followed her not out of loyalty, but fear. Even in a world full of hardened men, Griselda stood above them, sharp, cold, and always one step ahead. She was known for living lavishly, but nothing distracted her from control. Anyone who betrayed her even slightly didn't get a second chance. What made her so dangerous wasn't just the decisions she made, it was that she never hesitated to make them. Law enforcement called her unpredictable. Competitors called her untouchable. Griselda was eventually captured, but even behind bars, her name carried weight. She was released, disappeared for a while, then reappeared quietly in Colombia, where her story ended, not with a bang, but with a final, silent act of revenge from someone who never forgot. She taught the world that power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers from behind dark sunglasses and a luxury handbag. When people first met Judy Buenoano, they described her as kind, warm, even comforting. But beneath the calm exterior was someone with an agenda, one that left a disturbing trail behind her. She started by changing her last name, more than once. With each new name came a new relationship, and soon after, new tragedy. Husbands, boyfriends, even someone in her own family, all suffered sudden, unexplained illnesses. Accidents happened, one after another, but the stories didn't quite add up. Judy had a way of staying one step removed from the chaos. Her calm voice and tidy appearance made it hard for anyone to suspect her. She used trust as a tool, and when suspicion grew, she always had an answer. That's what made her so unsettling, her ability to keep the surface clean while the truth rotted underneath. Eventually, investigators began connecting the dots. A pattern emerged, one that couldn't be ignored. And once the full picture was revealed, it stunned even experienced detectives. She had been operating with quiet precision for years, all while smiling for the cameras and playing the victim. When she was finally brought to justice, she showed no fear, no guilt, just the same expression she always wore, composed, careful, unreadable. She wasn't in the headlines, but when she arrived at a high-security facility, guards were told not to approach her alone. Not because of her size, but because of her strength, her rage, and what she did to get there. Whispers in the prison called her the unstoppable one. Rumors say she flipped a squad car, others say it took over 12 officers to subdue her the first time. No one knows the full story, but no one dares to ask. She doesn't talk, she stares, and when she does, even the guards go quiet. In post-war Japan, life was already difficult for many families. Hospitals were overcrowded, resources were low, and desperation filled the air. That's where Miyuki Ishikawa came in. A trained midwife, she worked at a maternity clinic in Tokyo and was trusted by the public. But behind her uniform and calm demeanor, she made choices that shocked the nation. Miyuki didn't use violence, she used neglect. She believed some newborns, especially those born to poor or single mothers, had no future. So instead of helping them, she did the opposite. Over time, the numbers grew. Quietly. Consistently. Some say she believed she was sparing families from hardship. Others say she had her own motives. What's even more disturbing is that she wasn't acting alone. A few hospital staff members knew what was happening and looked the other way. When parents began asking questions and authorities finally stepped in, they found more than anyone expected. The records were incomplete. The truth had been hidden in plain sight. During her trial, Miyuki showed almost no emotion, no panic, no regret. She explained her actions with the same tone someone might use to discuss routine paperwork. It was that cold distance, that detachment that made her terrifying. In a towering castle nestled deep in the forests of Hungary, Elizabeth Bathory lived like royalty. She was a noblewoman, wealthy beyond measure, with estates, servants, and influence. But her legacy wasn't built on land or titles, it was built on something much darker. Behind those stone walls, she created a world where cruelty was routine, and no one dared to question her. Rumors started quietly. People whispered about missing girls from the surrounding villages. They said Elizabeth had a strange obsession with youth, with beauty, and with staying young forever. She would invite young women to her castle under promises of work or education, and they were never seen again. Locals feared her. Servants stayed silent. After all, she was protected by her status, and no one wanted to challenge a countess. When investigators were finally allowed inside the castle, they found a chilling scene. Stories turned into facts. The number of victims kept growing. Some claimed she kept detailed records in her own handwriting. Others said she believed her actions were necessary to preserve her appearance. Even when arrested, Elizabeth was never truly punished. Her nobility spared her a public trial. She was confined to her castle, locked in her own chambers, where she lived out the rest of her days in silence. No remorse, no apology, just cold stone walls and the weight of what she'd done. Bathory's case still haunts historians, not because of how brutal it was, but because of how long it was allowed to happen, all in plain sight. And centuries later, another woman would repeat that same formula, using charm, invitations, and a quiet farm. On the surface, Belle Gunness was a hard-working widow from Indiana. She raised children, kept to herself, and managed a small farm. But inside her house, something far more sinister was unfolding. She wasn't just looking for a new husband, she was setting a trap. Belle placed personal ads in newspapers offering love and partnership to lonely men. They came from all over, bringing savings and hope. But once they crossed her doorstep, they vanished, one by one, quietly, and Belle never reported a thing. Neighbors noticed the number of men coming and going, but Belle always had a reason. They left suddenly. They went back home. Her calm explanations and motherly tone made people believe her. For a while, everything changed when a fire burned her house to the ground. Authorities arrived and found something unexpected: a woman's body, children and more, buried in the yard. Dozens of remains spread across the property, carefully placed, hidden under dirt and lies. But here's the twist. Some still believe Belle faked her death, that the body in the fire wasn't hers, that she escaped and disappeared with one last victim's money. Her story doesn't have a clean ending, which only adds to the mystery. Belle Gunness didn't chase chaos. She invited it to dinner, poured it coffee, and led it to the cellar, just like the next woman, who turned her fists into weapons and fear into a performance. She was born in Northern Ireland, raised in England, and once dreamed of becoming a teacher. But something shifted. Samantha Lewthwaite transformed from a quiet schoolgirl into one of the most wanted women in the world. Her name made headlines across continents, not because of what she said, but because of what she was believed to be planning. After her husband was involved in a major bombing, Samantha vanished. Authorities thought she'd disappear into a quiet life. They were wrong. She resurfaced in East Africa under a new identity, new passport, new look, new plan. Officials believe she helped orchestrate attacks across several countries, carefully staying out of reach while spreading fear with every step. She was fluent in disguises. One day wearing a hijab, the next day posing as a tourist. Her trail left behind rented apartments, fake documents, and warnings. Reports linked her to more than one high-profile incident. Each time, she slipped away just before capture. Samantha's nickname, the White Widow, wasn't just a media creation. It symbolized something chilling, a quiet, clean image wrapped around a storm of secrets. Her face didn't match the fear she left behind, and that mismatch made her even more unsettling. She stood on highways with her thumb out and a story ready. Aileen Wuornos lived on the edge, no home, no safety net, just survival and grit. She wasn't like others on this list. She didn't blend in or charm her way through doors. She made herself known, and when she struck, she did it face to face. Aileen claimed she was acting in self-defense, that every man who picked her up had something dark in mind. But as the pattern grew, so did the questions. One man turned up dead, then another, always in remote spots, always shot at close range. Authorities eventually caught up with her in a small Florida town, drinking coffee and acting like nothing was wrong. She didn't hide behind excuses. In interviews, she stared directly into the camera, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. She spoke about betrayal, violence, and rage like someone who had lived in a world most people pretend doesn't exist. Some saw her as a monster, others as someone broken long before she ever pulled a trigger. Aileen's story has been turned into documentaries, news segments, and even a Hollywood film, but no dramatization can match the raw presence she had in real life. Her anger didn't explode, it simmered, then boiled over, leaving behind a trail no one could ignore. She was executed years later, but not before leaving one last chilling impression on everyone watching. Aileen Wuornos didn't ask for pity, she didn't even ask for forgiveness. She left a warning instead, that some people, if pushed far enough, don't run. They fight, and the results can shake even the toughest among us. These women weren't born with power, they took it. And in doing so, they became the kind of names history never forgets. That's about it. Which of these women do you consider the most dangerous? Write in the comments. For more useful information, watch other videos.